The stagecoach wheels kicked up clouds of dust as Evangeline Zimmerman stepped down onto the main street of Red Cloud, Nebraska, her carpetbag heavy with secrets and her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. It was the summer of 1878, and the small prairie town shimmered in the afternoon heat. Storefronts lined up like patient witnesses to whatever drama was about to unfold in this corner of the Great Plains. She smoothed down her modest gray traveling dress and lifted her chin, rehearsing the story she had told the hiring committee in her letters. Schoolteacher from Philadelphia. Excellent references. Eager to bring education to the frontier. All of it was a carefully constructed lie, except for the eagerness, which was real enough, though not for the reasons anyone might suspect. The truth was far more complicated and considerably less respectable. Evangeline had spent the last 3 years singing in saloons and dance halls across the eastern states. Her voice the only thing of value she possessed after her father's gambling debts had consumed everything else. She had become quite good at reading an audience, at knowing which songs would loosen purse strings and which would start fights. But the life had worn her down, left her hollow and aching for something clean, something real. When her friend Martha had mentioned that her cousin taught school out west, and that positions were going begging in towns desperate for educated women, Evangeline had seized the opportunity with both hands. She had forged references, borrowed money for proper clothes, and practiced her penmanship until it looked suitably refined. The school board had hired her sight unseen, so desperate were they for someone, anyone, who could teach their children. She had not counted on Zachary Erickson. He was leaning against the post outside the general store, a tall figure in dusty denim and worn leather, his hat pulled low against the sun. Even from a distance, Evangeline could see the way his eyes tracked her movement, sharp and assessing. There was something about his stillness that made her nervous, like a predator deciding whether its prey was worth the chase. "Miss Zimmerman." A portly man with a generous mustache hurried toward her, his face flushed with either heat or excitement. "Welcome, welcome to Red Cloud. I am Harold Peterson, head of the school board. We are so delighted you have arrived safely." Evangeline extended her gloved hand and smiled her most demure smile. "Mr. Peterson, thank you so much for this opportunity. I am eager to begin my work with the children." "Excellent, excellent. We have arranged lodging for you at Mrs. Cooper's boarding house. Very respectable establishment. And the schoolhouse is just at the end of Main Street. We will have a formal meeting tomorrow to discuss the curriculum, but for now, you must be exhausted from your journey." As Peterson prattled on about the town's amenities and the various families whose children she would be teaching, Evangeline became increasingly aware of the cowboy's continued scrutiny. He had not moved from his position, but she could feel his gaze like a physical touch, probing and intense. "And that is Zachary Erickson," Peterson said, following her glance. "Owns the largest ranch in the county, the Circle E, quite successful, though he keeps to himself mostly. Good man, though, solid." Zachary chose that moment to push away from the post and walk toward them with a loose-limbed grace that suggested both confidence and capability. Up close, Evangeline could see that he was younger than she had first thought, probably not yet 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a winter sky. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a slightly dangerous air. "Mr. Erickson," Peterson said heartily. "May I introduce Miss Evangeline Zimmerman, our new schoolteacher, madam." Zachary touched the brim of his hat, but those sharp eyes never left her face. "Welcome to Red Cloud. Thank you, Mr. Erickson." Evangeline kept her voice steady, though something about his scrutiny made her want to fidget. I hope to make a positive contribution to your community. I am sure you will." There was something in his tone, a slight emphasis that made the words sound almost like a challenge. "We could use someone with your particular talents." Her heart stuttered. Did he know? How could he possibly know? She had been so careful, had left her old life behind completely. But the way he was looking at her, as though he could see straight through her carefully constructed facade, made her stomach twist with anxiety. Peterson, oblivious to the undercurrent, continued his cheerful monologue. "Mr. Erickson is one of our most generous benefactors. He contributed significantly to the building of the schoolhouse." "How kind," Evangeline managed. "Kindness has nothing to do with it," Zachary said, his voice low and rough like gravel. "Children need education. That is just practical." Before she could respond, a young boy came running up, out of breath and wild-eyed. "Mr. Erickson, sir, your foreman sent me. There is trouble at the north pasture. Fence is down and cattle are scattering." Zachary's expression shifted immediately, all business. "How many head?" "Do not know for sure, sir, but Tom said it looks deliberate, cut wire, not broken." A muscle in Zachary's jaw tightened. "Tell him I am on my way." He turned back to Evangeline, touching his hat again. "Madam, Mr. Peterson, if you will excuse me." He was gone before she could reply, moving with swift purpose toward a magnificent black horse tied nearby. Within moments, he was mounted and riding hard out of town, dust billowing in his wake. "Cattle rustling," Peterson said with a heavy sigh. "We have had some trouble with that lately." "Very unfortunate, but Mr. Erickson will handle it. He always does." Evangeline watched the distant figure disappear over a rise, an odd feeling settling in her chest. There had been something in the way Zachary Erickson had looked at her, something that suggested he knew far more than he should. She would have to be very, very careful. Mrs. Cooper's boarding house turned out to be a tidy two-story building with lace curtains and a well-tended garden. The proprietress was a widow in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Evangeline painfully of her own mother, dead these past 5 years. "You will take your meals with the other boarders," Mrs. Cooper explained as she led Evangeline up the narrow stairs. "Breakfast at 7, supper at 6. I do not tolerate drinking, gambling, or unseemly behavior of any kind. This is a respectable house." "Of course," Evangeline said quickly. "I would expect nothing less." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for her belongings. A single window looked out over Main Street, and Evangeline could see the schoolhouse in the distance, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower. After Mrs. Cooper left, Evangeline sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of trembling relief. She had made it. She was here in this small prairie town where no one knew her, where she could start fresh and build the kind of life she had always dreamed of. Respectable, clean, honest. Except, of course, for the foundational lie upon which it was all built. She thought again of Zachary Erickson's piercing gaze and shivered. Tomorrow she would visit the schoolhouse and begin preparing for her new role. Tonight, she would simply rest and try not to think about the way that Cowboy had looked at her, as though he could see straight into her soul. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the prairie stretching endlessly in all directions under a sky so vast it made Evangeline's breath catch. She had never seen anything like it in Philadelphia, where buildings crowded close and the horizon was always interrupted. Here, there was nothing but space and possibility. The schoolhouse was indeed at the end of Main Street, set slightly apart from the other buildings. It was newer than most, the wood still showing pale where the sun had not yet weathered it. Inside, rows of simple benches faced a battered desk and a large slate board. Books were stacked on shelves along one wall, and a pot-bellied stove sat cold and ready for the winter months ahead. Evangeline ran her hand over the desk, feeling the grain of the wood beneath her fingers. This was hers. This was real. Whatever she had been before, she could be a teacher now. She had always been quick with letters and numbers, had read everything she could get her hands on during the years when her father's fortunes had still been intact. She could do this. It is not much, but it serves. She spun around to find Zachary Erickson standing in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking most of the light. He had cleaned up since yesterday, she noticed, though his clothes were still working garb, practical and worn. "Mr. Erickson, you startled me. Apologies." He stepped inside, removing his hat. "I wanted to speak with you privately before the school board meeting this afternoon." Her pulse quickened. "Oh," he studied her for a long moment, those winter sky eyes missing nothing. Then he said very quietly, "I saw you sing at the Silver Dollar in Denver 3 months ago." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Evangeline gripped the edge of the desk, fighting the urge to run. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." His voice was not unkind, but it was implacable. "You were wearing a blue dress with black lace. You sang Beautiful Dreamer and Lorna. You had every man in that saloon eating out of your hand." She could not breathe, could not think. Her carefully constructed new life was crumbling before it had even begun. "Are you going to tell them?" "No." The word hung in the air between them, unexpected and confusing. Evangeline looked up at him, searching his face for some sign of what he wanted, what this was going to cost her. Men always wanted something. "Why not?" she whispered. Zachary moved closer but stopped a respectful distance away. "Because I heard you talking to the bartender that night. You told him you were leaving the circuit, that you were done with that life. You said you wanted something different, something better, and I believed you." Tears pricked at her eyes, though she fought them back fiercely. "I meant it. Every word. I cannot go back to that, Mr. Erickson. I would rather die than go back to that." "Then you will not have to." He said it as though it were simple, as though her entire future had not been balanced on a knife's edge just moments before. "As far as I am concerned, you are Miss Evangeline Zimmerman, schoolteacher from Philadelphia. That is all anyone needs to know." But why? She had to understand this, had to know what he expected in return. "Why would you keep my secret?" He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. Then he said, "My mother was a saloon girl in Abilene before she met my father. She never told anyone, but I knew. I saw how people treated women like her, how they assumed the worst no matter what the truth was. She was a good woman, Miss Zimmerman, kind and decent and loving. But if anyone in Abilene had known where she came from, they would have run her out of town." Understanding bloomed in Evangeline's chest, warm and unexpected. "What happened to her?" "She died when I was 15. Influenza." His voice was steady, but she could hear the old grief underneath. "But she lived long enough to see my father build the Circle E into something prosperous. Long enough to be respected as Mrs. Erickson, rancher's wife. That meant everything to her. I am so sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. "The point is," Zachary continued, "everyone deserves a chance to start over, to be better than what circumstances made them. If you are serious about teaching these children, about making a real life here, then I will not stand in your way." Relief washed over her so powerfully she had to sit down on the edge of the desk. "Thank you. You cannot know what this means to me. I have some idea." He settled his hat back on his head. "But I do have one condition." Here it was, the catch. She braced herself. "What is it?" "I need someone to help with the ranch accounts. My foreman is good with cattle but terrible with numbers, and I have been managing the books myself. But with the herd growing and the rustling trouble, I need to focus on the ranch operations." I will pay you fair wages to come out to the Circle E twice a week and handle the paperwork." Evangeline blinked. Of all the demands she had been expecting, this was not among them. "That is all. You want me to keep your books. That is all." A hint of amusement flickered across his stern features. "I am not asking for anything improper, Miss Zimmerman. Just work in exchange for wages and my silence. Is that acceptable?" She should be suspicious, should question his motives more thoroughly. But something in his direct gaze and steady manner made her believe him. He was offering her exactly what he said, nothing more and nothing less. "Yes," she said. "That is acceptable. Good. I will send someone to fetch you on Wednesday afternoon after school lets out. We can start then." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Miss Zimmerman, you are going to do just fine here. You have the look of someone who knows how to work hard. That is all that matters in a place like this." Then he was gone, leaving Evangeline alone in the schoolhouse with the morning sun streaming through the windows and a feeling of cautious hope beginning to take root in her chest. The school board meeting went smoothly. Mr. Peterson and the other board members, 2 ranchers and the owner of the general store, asked her about her teaching philosophy and her plans for the curriculum. Evangeline drew on everything she remembered from her own school days, and from conversations she had overheard in boarding houses and train stations. She spoke about the importance of reading and arithmetic, about teaching children to think critically and express themselves clearly. They seemed pleased, even impressed. When the meeting ended, Peterson pumped her hand enthusiastically and declared that Red Cloud was lucky to have her, if only they knew the truth. School was set to begin the following Monday, giving Evangeline just under a week to prepare. She spent her days organizing the schoolhouse, reviewing the available textbooks, and planning lessons. In the evenings, she took her meals at Mrs. Cooper's table alongside the other boarders. A traveling salesman, an elderly clerk from the land office, and a young married couple who were homesteading a claim east of town. The conversations were pleasant and mundane, centered on crops and weather and local gossip. Evangeline learned that Zachary Erickson was considered something of a catch, though he showed no interest in courting. Several mothers with marriageable daughters had made their intentions clear, but he remained politely aloof. "Too proud, if you ask me," Mrs. Cooper said, passing the potatoes. "A man of his means should be thinking about marriage and heirs. He is not getting any younger." "Maybe he just has not met the right woman," the young wife suggested dreamily. "Or maybe he is married to that ranch of his," the salesman said with a laugh. "Some men are like that. Land and cattle are all they need." Evangeline said nothing, but she found herself thinking about the cowboy more often than she should. There had been kindness in his offer, a fundamental decency that surprised her. Most men she had known would have used her secret as leverage, would have demanded something in return. But Zachary Erickson had simply offered her work and kept his word. Wednesday afternoon arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze from the south. Evangeline dismissed her imaginary students, for she had taken to practicing her teaching on empty benches and waited on the schoolhouse steps. Right on time, a wagon pulled up driven by a weathered man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard. "Miss Zimmerman." "Name is Tom Rafferty, foreman at the Circle E. Mr. Erickson sent me to fetch you." "Thank you, Mr. Rafferty." Evangeline climbed up onto the wagon seat, arranging her skirts carefully. The ride out to the ranch took about 30 minutes, following a well-worn track across the rolling prairie. Cattle grazed in the distance, red and white shapes against the golden grass. The Circle E ranch house came into view gradually, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings scattered nearby. Zachary was waiting on the porch and he came down the steps as the wagon pulled up. "Miss Zimmerman, I appreciate you coming out. Of course, I am happy to help." It was strange how true that felt, how the prospect of honest work filled her with a satisfaction she had not experienced in years. He led her into the house, through a parlor furnished with simple but well-made pieces, and into a study lined with books. A large desk sat near the window, its surface buried under stacks of papers, ledgers, and receipts. "I apologize for the mess," Zachary said, sounding slightly embarrassed. "As I mentioned, bookkeeping is not my strong suit." Evangeline surveyed the chaos with a practiced eye. "It is not as bad as it looks. We just need to organize everything by date and category. Do you have a filing system?" "A what?" She could not help but smile. "Never mind. We will create one. Show me what you have been doing so far." For the next 2 hours, they worked side by side, Evangeline sorting papers while Zachary explained the ranch operations. He was patient and thorough, answering her questions without condescension. She learned about breeding schedules and grazing rotations, about the market prices for beef, and the costs of maintaining fencing and equipment. "You have a good head for this," Zachary observed as she rapidly tallied a column of numbers. "Where did you learn accounting?" Evangeline hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "My father was in business before he died. I used to help him with his books." What she did not mention was that she had learned to track every penny after his death, when she had discovered the extent of his debts and realized she was on her own. "Well, you are a godsend as far as I am concerned. I have been spending hours on this every week, and I still cannot make the numbers balance properly." "That is because you have been recording the same transactions in multiple places," she said, pointing to the ledger. "See, this payment for feed is listed here, and again here. You are counting it 3 times. He leaned over her shoulder to look, and she became suddenly aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of leather and sage. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to focus on the numbers in front of her. "I see it now," he said, and she could hear the chagrin in his voice. "No wonder nothing added up. I have been making this more complicated than it needs to be." "It is a common mistake," she assured him. "We will get it sorted out." They worked in comfortable silence for a while longer, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows and painting everything in shades of gold. Evangeline found herself relaxing in a way she had not allowed herself to do in years. There was something soothing about the simple task of organizing numbers, about the quiet presence of the man beside her. When Tom Rafferty knocked on the door to announce that he was ready to take her back to town, Evangeline was surprised to realize how quickly the time had passed. "Same time next week?" Zachary asked as he walked her out to the wagon. "Yes, that would be fine. I should have a better system in place by then." "I appreciate this, Miss Zimmerman, truly." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand steady and warm on her arm. "And I appreciate your discretion, Mr. Erickson. We are even." Something flickered in his eyes, something she could not quite name. "I hope we might eventually be more than even. I hope we might be friends." The words settled around her heart like a warm blanket. Friends. When was the last time she had had a real friend? Someone who knew the truth about her and did not judge. "I would like that," she said softly. He nodded, stepping back as Tom Rafferty clucked to the horses. As the wagon pulled away, Evangeline looked back to see Zachary still standing there, watching her go, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Something dangerous and hopeful and terrifying all at once. School began on Monday with 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Evangeline had been nervous, afraid that her lack of formal training would show, but the children were eager and responsive. She taught them reading and arithmetic, history and geography, and was surprised by how much she enjoyed the work. There was Sarah Peterson, Mr. Peterson's daughter, who was shy but brilliant with numbers. And the Murphy twins, red-haired hellions who could not sit still but had quick minds when properly challenged. Little Emma Chandler, only 6 years old, who gazed at Evangeline with hero worship and tried to copy everything she did. By the end of the first week, Evangeline felt like she had found her calling. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying. She fell into bed each night too tired to dream, and woke each morning eager to begin again. Her twice-weekly visits to the Circle E became the highlight of her week, though she tried not to examine that fact too closely. She told herself it was the work she enjoyed, the satisfaction of bringing order to chaos. But if she was honest, it was also Zachary's company. He was different from any man she had known. Direct and honest, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He treated her with respect, like an equal, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. They talked about everything: books and politics, the challenges of frontier life, their hopes for the future of Red Cloud. "The railroad will be here within 5 years, Zachary predicted one afternoon as they reviewed the feed costs. "When that happens, everything will change. We will be able to ship cattle directly to Chicago, prices will stabilize, more people will come." "Is that a good thing?" Evangeline asked. "Depends on your perspective. Progress is inevitable, but it always comes with a cost. The open range is already shrinking. In another generation, all of this will be fenced and settled. You sound sad about that." He was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the endless prairie. "I am not sure if sad is the right word. Wistful, maybe. My father came out here when this was still wilderness. He built something from nothing, but he also knew it would not last forever. Nothing does." "That is rather melancholy, Mr. Erickson." "Zachary," he said, turning to look at her. "I think after 2 months of working together, you can call me Zachary." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Only if you will call me Evangeline." Evangeline. The way he said her name, low and careful like something precious, made her heart flutter. "It suits you." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Evangeline was afraid to name. Then Zachary cleared his throat and turned back to the ledgers, and the spell was broken. But something had shifted. She felt it in the way he looked at her now, in the casual brush of his hand against hers when he passed her papers, in the way he found excuses to keep her at the ranch a little longer each visit, offering her coffee or asking her opinion on ranch matters that had nothing to do with bookkeeping. And she felt it in herself, in the way her heart lifted when Tom Rafferty's wagon appeared to collect her, in the way she found herself thinking about Zachary at odd moments during the school day, in the way she had started taking extra care with her appearance on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It was dangerous, this growing attachment. She had promised herself she would build a respectable life, and nothing could be more destructive to that goal than falling for her employer. If anyone discovered the true nature of her past, association with her could ruin Zachary's reputation as well. But despite all her rational arguments, she could not seem to stop the warmth that flooded through her whenever he smiled at her, or the longing that took root in her chest when she lay alone in her narrow bed at night. October arrived with a crispness in the air, and the prairie grasses turning gold. The children were progressing well in their studies, and Evangeline had earned the respect and gratitude of their parents. She was invited to Sunday dinners and church socials, embraced by the community as one of their own. The guilt of her deception weighed on her more heavily as time passed. These people trusted her. They welcomed her into their homes and lives, and all of it was built on a lie. "You are thinking too hard again," Zachary observed one afternoon. They were sitting on the ranch house porch, taking a break from the account books. The air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. "Am I?" She tried to smile, but it felt forced. "You get a little crease right here when you are worrying." He reached out and gently touched the space between her eyebrows, and Evangeline's breath caught at the unexpected intimacy of the gesture. "I suppose I have a lot on my mind," she admitted. "Anything you want to talk about?" She looked at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes, and felt the words rising up despite her better judgment. "Do you ever feel like a fraud? Like you are pretending to be something you are not?" Zachary was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Every single day." She had not expected that answer. "Really? People in town think I have it all figured out. Successful ranch, plenty of money in the bank. But the truth is, I am terrified most of the time. Terrified I am going to make a wrong decision and lose everything my father built. Terrified that I am not good enough, smart enough, strong enough to keep it all going." "But you are," Evangeline said earnestly. "Zachary, you are one of the most capable people I have ever met." He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "That means more than you know, coming from you." "Why from me?" "Because you see me. Not the ranch or the money or the reputation, just me. And somehow you seem to think I am worth something." "You are worth everything," she said without thinking, and then flushed when she realized what she had revealed. Zachary reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. His palm was warm and calloused, strong and steady. "Evangeline, I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." The world seemed to stop. Evangeline stared at him, unable to breathe, unable to think. "Zachary, you do not know everything about me. I know enough. I know you are kind and smart and brave. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you care about those children like they are your own. I know that when you smile, it feels like the sun coming out after a long winter." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know that you are a good person, Evangeline. Whatever you did before you came here, it does not change that." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I sang in saloons, Zachary. I took money from drunk men to perform for them. I was not respectable. I was not anything these people would accept if they knew." "You were surviving," he said fiercely. "You were doing what you had to do to stay alive after your father left you alone and in debt. There is no shame in that. The world does not see it that way. Society does not see it that way." "Then society can go hang." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I see you, Evangeline, the real you, and I love what I see." "I love you too," she whispered, the truth of it overwhelming. "I have been trying so hard not to, but I cannot help it." "I love you, Zachary Erickson." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and reverent, and Evangeline felt like she was coming home after a lifetime of wandering. His lips were warm against hers, his hands gentle as they cradled her face. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses of the men who had cornered her in saloon back rooms. This was different. This was real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." Evangeline's eyes flew open. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Be my wife. Help me run this ranch. Build a life with me." "Zachary, I cannot ask you to take that risk. If anyone ever found out about my past, it would destroy your reputation. People would say you married a fallen woman." "Let them say whatever they want. I do not care." He pulled back far enough to look into her eyes. "Evangeline, I have spent my whole life trying to live up to my father's legacy, trying to be what everyone expected, and I have been miserable. But with you, I am happy. I am myself. That is worth more than any reputation." She wanted to say yes, wanted it so desperately it hurt, but she had to make sure he understood what he was risking. What if someone from Denver comes through town? What if they recognize me? Then we will deal with it together. I am not afraid of gossip, Evangeline. I am only afraid of losing you. The sincerity in his voice broke through the last of her resistance. She had spent so long being afraid, so long protecting herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. But Zachary was not asking for her protection. He was offering his own. "Yes," she said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." His answering smile was like dawn breaking, brilliant and transformative. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Evangeline let herself fall into it, into him, into the promise of a future she had never dared to dream was possible. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church at the edge of town, with the whole community in attendance. Evangeline wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Cooper had helped her sew, and Zachary stood beside her in his best suit, his hand steady as he slipped a gold ring onto her finger. Mr. Peterson beamed as though he had personally arranged the match. Mrs. Cooper wept happy tears. The children from school giggled and whispered in the pews, thrilled that their teacher was marrying the richest rancher in the county. No one questioned the speed of the courtship. On the frontier, people tended to be practical about such things. When you found someone suitable, you did not waste time. What they did not know, what no one knew except the bride and groom, was that this marriage was an act of faith as much as love. Faith that the past could stay buried. Faith that secrets could be kept. Faith that two wounded people could build something whole and good together. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed half the county. There was music and dancing, and Evangeline found herself passed from partner to partner, everyone wanting to congratulate the new Mrs. Erickson. But her eyes kept finding Zachary across the crowd, and every time their gazes met, she felt that same flutter in her chest, that same sense of rightness that had overwhelmed her when he first kissed her. As the sun began to set and the guests started to drift away, Zachary found her near the barn and took her hand. Ready to go inside, Mrs. Erickson? The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Erickson. She was married. She had a husband who loved her, a home, a future. It was more than she had ever hoped for. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hand. "I am ready." He led her into the ranch house, up the stairs to the bedroom that was now theirs. Someone, probably Tom Rafferty's wife, had put fresh flowers on the dresser and turned down the bed. The window was open, letting in the cool evening breeze and the sounds of the prairie settling into night. Zachary closed the door and turned to her, suddenly looking uncertain. "I want you to know, I have no expectations for tonight. We can take this as slow as you need." Evangeline felt a rush of love for this careful, considerate man. "I trust you, Zachary, completely." He crossed to her and began slowly unbuttoning the back of her dress, his fingers gentle and patient. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her neck. "I cannot believe you are mine." "I cannot believe you are mine," she whispered back. They undressed each other slowly, reverently, and when Zachary finally laid her down on the bed and covered her body with his own, Evangeline understood for the first time what it meant to make love. This was not the furtive, shameful encounters she had fought off in her saloon days. This was sacred. This was two souls meeting and recognizing each other as home. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Zachary's hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "Deliriously," she said, and meant it. The first few months of married life were the happiest Evangeline had ever known. She continued teaching, now riding out to the schoolhouse each morning in a buggy Zachary had bought especially for her. In the afternoons, she would return to the ranch and help with the accounts. then spend the evenings cooking dinner with Zachary or reading together in the parlor. Winter came early that year, with snow falling in thick sheets and temperatures plunging. The schoolhouse was often bitterly cold despite the pot-bellied stove, and Evangeline found herself layering petticoats and shawls just to keep warm. But she loved it. Loved the challenge of teaching multiplication to students whose fingers were too cold to hold pencils properly. Loved the way little Emma Chandler would curl up beside the stove during lunch break and beg Evangeline to tell her stories. Loved the satisfaction of watching her students improve week by week, their confidence growing along with their skills. At home, she and Zachary settled into comfortable routines. He would wake before dawn to check on the cattle and oversee the ranch operations, while she prepared breakfast and packed lunches. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk about their days, and Zachary would tell her stories about his childhood, about learning to ride from his father, and the time he fell into a creek chasing a runaway calf. Evangeline shared what she could of her own past, carefully editing out the parts that still felt too raw to speak aloud. She told him about her mother's flower garden and the way her father used to sing off-key while shaving. She told him about learning to read from her grandmother, and the summer she turned 10 and decided she wanted to be a bird. What she did not tell him, what she could not bear to speak of, was the night her father lost their house in a card game. The morning she woke to find him gone, a note on the table saying he could not face his creditors. The months that followed, selling everything of value just to eat, until finally there was nothing left but herself. Some memories were still too painful, and she tucked them away in the dark corners of her heart where even Zachary could not reach. Christmas came, and Evangeline organized a pageant at the school. The children performed with endearing earnestness, stumbling through lines and singing slightly off-key. Parents dabbed at their eyes and applauded wildly. Afterward, there was cider and cookies, and Evangeline stood beside Zachary receiving congratulations like visiting royalty. "You have done wonders with them," Mrs. Peterson gushed. "Sarah has never been so excited about learning. You are a treasure, Miss Zimmerman. I mean Mrs. Erickson." She giggled at her mistake. Evangeline smiled and thanked her, but inside she felt the familiar twist of guilt. These people trusted her so completely, and she was lying to them every single day. That night, lying in bed with Zachary's arm around her waist, she finally voiced her fears. "What if someone finds out? What if my past catches up with us?" "Then we will handle it," Zachary said, pulling her closer. "Together. You are not alone anymore, Evangeline. Whatever comes, we face it side by side." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and determination would be enough to weather any storm. But a small, fearful part of her whispered that the past was never truly buried. Sooner or later, it always came back to haunt you. Spring arrived with a burst of green across the prairie and the birth of new calves at the Circle E. Evangeline threw herself into her work, both at school and at the ranch. The account books were now meticulously organized, and she had even suggested some improvements to ranch operations that had increased profitability. "You have a real gift for this," Tom Rafferty told her one afternoon as they reviewed the breeding records. "Mr. Erickson is lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Evangeline said truthfully. In May, Evangeline realized she had missed her monthly courses. Then another month passed, and she knew. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. A baby. She and Zachary were going to have a baby. But what kind of mother would she be with her checkered past and her carefully constructed lies? She waited until they were alone after supper to tell him. Zachary was reading a livestock report, his feet propped up on the ottoman. He looked so peaceful, so content, that she almost could not bear to disturb him. "Zachary, I need to tell you something." He looked up immediately, hearing the tremor in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine." She took a deep breath. "I am going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, processing. Then a grin spread across his face, transforming him into someone younger, lighter, almost boyish. "A baby? Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I think so." He was across the room in 3 strides, lifting her up and spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby. Evangeline, this is incredible." His joy was infectious, and Evangeline found herself laughing, her fears temporarily forgotten. "Put me down, you madman. You will make me dizzy." He set her down carefully, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Tears streamed down Evangeline's face as she ran her fingers through his hair. This man, this wonderful, surprising man who had seen the worst of her and loved her anyway. How had she gotten so lucky? "I love you," she whispered. He looked up at her, his eyes shining. "I love you too, both of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer months. Evangeline continued teaching until the school term ended in June, then spent the hot months helping around the ranch as much as her growing belly would allow. The women of Red Cloud rallied around her with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Mrs. Cooper knitted tiny booties and caps. Zachary became almost comically protective, insisting she rest at the slightest sign of fatigue and hovering anxiously whenever she had to navigate the stairs. It was endearing, if occasionally irritating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to carry her up to bed for a nap. "Humor me," he said, scooping her up anyway. "I have never done this before. I am allowed to be nervous." In August, during a particularly hot afternoon, Evangeline was sitting on the porch snapping beans when a stranger rode up to the ranch house. He was well dressed for a traveler, with a gold watch chain visible across his vest and boots that had clearly never seen a hard day's work. "Good afternoon," he called out, dismounting. "I am looking for the Circle E Ranch. Am I in the right place?" "You are," Evangeline said, setting aside the beans and rising carefully to her feet. Her back ached from sitting and the baby was pressing against her ribs. "How can I help you?" The man's eyes widened as he took in her pregnant state. "My apologies, madam. I did not mean to disturb you. I am looking for Mr. Zachary Erickson. I have business to discuss with him. He should be back from the north pasture soon. You are welcome to wait on the porch." "That is very kind." The man climbed the steps and removed his hat, revealing slicked-back dark hair and a face that was vaguely familiar in a way that made Evangeline's stomach clench with unease. "Can I offer you some water? Or perhaps coffee?" "Water would be wonderful, thank you." She went inside to fetch it, her mind racing. Where had she seen this man before? His face nagged at her memory, but she could not quite place it. When she returned with the water, he was studying the ranch with an appraising eye. "Quite an operation Mr. Erickson has here. Very impressive." "Yes, he has worked very hard." Evangeline handed him the glass, careful not to let their fingers touch. "And you must be Mrs. Erickson. I can see congratulations are in order." He gestured to her belly. "Thank you." She sat down again, wishing Zachary would hurry. Something about this man set her teeth on edge. "You know," the stranger said conversationally, "you look very familiar. Have we met before?" Evangeline's heart stopped. "I do not believe so. I have lived in Red Cloud for nearly a year now. Before that I was back east." Perhaps I am mistaken." But his eyes were sharp, calculating. "It is just that I could swear I have seen you somewhere, maybe in Denver. I passed through there last spring on business." The memory crashed over her like a wave. She had seen him. He had been at the Silver Dollar, sitting in the back corner nursing whiskey while she sang. He had watched her with the same calculating expression he was wearing now. "No," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have never been to Denver." Before he could press further, the sound of hoofbeats announced Zachary's arrival. He rode up quickly, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. Evangeline could see the tension in his shoulders as he took in the stranger on his porch. "Can I help you?" Zachary's voice was polite but cool. "Mr. Erickson, I presume? My name is Gerald Thornton. I represent a cattle syndicate out of Chicago. We are very interested in purchasing ranches in this area for consolidation. I would like to discuss a potential sale of the Circle E." "The Circle E is not for sale," Zachary said flatly. I understand. But perhaps if you heard our offer, you might reconsider. We are prepared to be very generous. Not interested." Zachary moved to stand beside Evangeline, his hand coming to rest protectively on her shoulder. "Now, if you will excuse us, my wife needs to rest." Thornton's eyes flickered between them, and Evangeline saw the moment recognition clicked into place. His smile turned predatory. "Your wife? Of course. Though I must say she looks remarkably like a woman I saw performing in a Denver saloon not too long ago. Beautiful voice. Quite a draw for the establishment." The world went silent. Evangeline could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic in her ears. Beside her, Zachary went very still. "You are mistaken," Zachary said, his voice like iron. "My wife is a schoolteacher, born and raised in Philadelphia. She has never set foot in a saloon in her life." "Is that so?" Thornton pulled a newspaper clipping from his pocket. "Because I happen to have this advertisement for the Silver Dollar, and that certainly looks like your wife's likeness right here." Evangeline did not need to see it to know what it showed. The manager had commissioned drawings of his most popular performers to use in promotional materials. She had posed for one, wearing the blue dress Zachary had mentioned seeing her in. "I think you should leave," Zachary said quietly, but there was steel beneath the words. "Now, of course, I have no desire to cause trouble." Thornton tucked the clipping away and settled his hat back on his head. "Though I must say, the good people of Red Cloud might be very interested to know that their schoolteacher has such a colorful past. Unless, of course, we can come to some sort of arrangement regarding the sale of your ranch." Understanding crashed over Evangeline like a bucket of ice water. This was not about recognizing her. This was about leverage. Thornton had done his research, discovered her secret, and was now using it to force Zachary's hand. "Get off my land," Zachary said, his voice deadly calm. "And if I hear even a whisper of this conversation around town, I will make sure everyone knows you are nothing but a blackmailing snake who preys on decent people." "Strong words, Mr. Erickson, but we both know you have far more to lose than I do. Your wife's reputation, your own standing in the community, perhaps even her position at the school. All of that could disappear with a few well-placed words." Zachary's fist connected with Thornton's jaw before Evangeline could blink. The stranger went down hard, landing on his back on the porch with blood streaming from his split lip. "I said get out." Zachary stood over him, breathing hard. "And do not come back." Thornton scrambled to his feet, backing toward his horse. "You will regret this, Erickson, both of you." He mounted quickly and rode off, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air behind him. Evangeline stood frozen, her hands pressed against her swollen belly. This was it. Everything she had feared come to pass. Her secret was out, and there was nothing she could do to stop what was coming next. "Evangeline." Zachary turned to her, his expression anguished. "Are you all right?" She could not speak, could only shake her head as tears began to stream down her face. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and held her while she sobbed. "It is going to be all right. I will fix this." "You cannot fix this," she choked out. "He is going to tell everyone. I am going to lose everything. The school, the respect of the town, everything I worked so hard for. No, I will not let that happen. Zachary, you cannot stop gossip. Once word gets out, it will spread like wildfire, and you will be ruined along with me for marrying a saloon girl." He pulled back far enough to cup her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. I do not care what anyone in this town thinks. I do not care if they talk. You are my wife, the mother of my child, and nothing is going to change that. But your reputation, the ranch, can all go hang if it means losing you. Evangeline, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would burn it all down before I let anyone hurt you." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his love would be enough. But she had seen how quickly society could turn on a woman, how merciless judgment could be. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. Zachary was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his jaw set with determination. "We are going to tell them ourselves. Before Thornton can spread his poison, we are going to tell the truth. Zachary, no. If we tell them, they will run me out of town. Or they will surprise us. These people are not Philadelphia society, Evangeline. They are frontier folk who know about second chances and hard choices. We give them the truth, and we give them the chance to show what they are made of." It was terrifying. It was possibly the worst idea she had ever heard. But looking into Zachary's steady, certain eyes, Evangeline found herself nodding. "Together?" she asked. "Together," he confirmed. That Sunday, Zachary stood up during the church social and asked for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, curious about what the usually reserved rancher had to say. Evangeline stood beside him, her hand clasped tightly in his, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. "Thank you all for gathering," Zachary began. "Evangeline and I have something we need to share with you, and we wanted you to hear it from us before you heard it anywhere else." He looked at her, and she saw the love and support shining in his eyes. She nodded, giving him permission to continue. "Before my wife came to Red Cloud, she had a difficult past. Her father died, leaving her with nothing but debts, and she did what she had to do to survive. For a time, she sang in saloons." A murmur ran through the crowd. Evangeline saw shock on some faces, judgment on others. Mrs. Peterson's hand flew to her mouth. "I know this because I saw her perform once before either of us came to this town," Zachary continued. "And I knew when I hired her to help with the ranch accounts. I knew when I fell in love with her. I knew when I asked her to marry me. And I would make the same choices again, because Evangeline is the finest person I have ever known." He turned to face the crowd more fully, his voice growing stronger. "She has taught your children to read and write and think. She has treated every single one of them with kindness and respect. She has become part of this community, and she has given everything she has to make Red Cloud a better place. Her past does not change any of that." Evangeline found her voice, though it shook. "I am sorry for deceiving you. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would not give me a chance. And I wanted so badly to have a chance at a different life, a better life. I never meant to hurt anyone." Silence fell over the gathering. Evangeline could hear the wind rustling through the trees, the distant lowing of cattle. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, judging, weighing, deciding. Then Mr. Peterson stepped forward. His face was troubled, and Evangeline braced herself for condemnation. "Miss Zimmerman, Mrs. Erickson, I mean, I will not lie and say this is not shocking news. It is. And I am disappointed that you did not feel you could trust us with the truth from the beginning." Evangeline's heart sank. This was it. They were going to ask her to leave. However, Peterson continued, my daughter Sarah has learned more in the past year than she did in the 3 years before you arrived. She loves school now. She talks about wanting to become a teacher herself. That is because of you, because of your dedication and your skill. He looked around at the other parents, many of whom were nodding. We are not perfect people. Every one of us has done things we are not proud of. Every one of us has made choices we wish we could take back. Who are we to judge someone for doing what they had to do to survive? Hear, hear, called out Tom Rafferty. Mrs. Erickson has always been good to us at the ranch. Works harder than most men I know. Past is past. What matters is who she is now. Mrs. Cooper dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. When I lost my husband, I did not know how I would survive. People in this town helped me. They gave me a chance to start a boarding house to make a living. Everyone deserves that kind of second chance. One by one, people stepped forward to voice their support. Not everyone, there were some who remained silent, their faces hard with disapproval. But more spoke up than Evangeline had dared hope. You are one of us, declared the blacksmith's wife, a formidable woman named Martha. We look after our own. Evangeline was openly weeping now, overwhelmed by their acceptance. Zachary's arm came around her shoulders, steady and strong. Does this mean I can keep teaching? She asked Peterson. He smiled. I will need to discuss it with the school board, but I do not see why not. You are still the best qualified person for the job. The social resumed, though the atmosphere was subdued. Not everyone was comfortable with the revelations, and Evangeline knew that some bridges might never be fully mended. But she had not been run out of town. She had not lost everything. As they drove home in the buggy that evening, Evangeline leaned against Zachary's shoulder, exhausted but relieved. Thank you, she said quietly, for standing with me, for believing in me. Always, he said, kissing the top of her head. We are in this together, remember, for better or worse. I think we just went through some of the worse. Then it can only get better from here. She wished she could believe that, but she could not shake the feeling that Gerald Thornton was not finished with them yet. She was right. 2 weeks later, an article appeared in the Omaha newspaper, detailing the scandal of a Red Cloud schoolteacher who had hidden her saloon past. It was carefully worded to avoid outright libel, but the implications were clear. The article questioned whether such a woman was fit to teach impressionable children, and suggested that the school board's acceptance of her showed a dangerous lack of moral standards. Thornton's handiwork, without a doubt. The article was picked up by other papers throughout Nebraska and even made it into a Kansas City publication. Suddenly, Red Cloud was at the center of a regional controversy about morality and education and second chances. The school board held an emergency meeting. Evangeline attended, her hands folded in her lap and her head held high, even though she was trembling inside. The question before us, Peterson said heavily, is whether Mrs. Erickson should continue as teacher given the attention this matter has attracted. We have received letters from concerned citizens in other towns, asking how we can allow someone with such a history to influence young minds. Those people do not live here, Tom Rafferty pointed out. He had been invited to sit in as a representative of the parents. They do not know Mrs. Erickson. We do, and every parent I have spoken to wants her to keep teaching. That may be true, but we also have to consider the reputation of our school and our town, another board member argued. This kind of publicity could harm us in the long run. The debate went on for over an hour. Evangeline sat silent, letting them discuss her fate as though she were not in the room. She felt oddly detached, as though this were happening to someone else. Finally, Peterson called for a vote. All in favor of retaining Mrs. Erickson as teacher, raise your hand. 3 hands went up, including Peterson's own. All opposed. 2 hands. The motion passes. Mrs. Erickson, you may continue in your position. Relief flooded through her, though it was tempered by the knowledge that the vote had been close. Too close. Thank you, she said quietly. I will not let you down. Outside, Zachary was waiting with the buggy. One look at her face and he knew. They kept you on, by 1 vote. He helped her up into the seat, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. This is Thornton's doing. He is trying to force my hand by destroying your reputation. It is working, Evangeline said bitterly. Zachary, maybe we should just sell him the ranch, get out of here and start fresh somewhere else. No. The word was flat and final. I am not letting that snake win, and I am not running away from my home, from everything my father built because some blackmailer wants to play dirty. Then what do? We wait, and we trust that the truth will outlast the lies. It was a difficult few months. The controversy gradually died down as other news took its place, but the damage lingered. Some parents pulled their children from school, though most remained. Evangeline felt the weight of judgment every time she walked down Main Street, saw it in the way certain women would cross to the other side to avoid speaking to her. But there were also unexpected kindnesses. Mrs. Cooper made a point of inviting Evangeline to tea every week. Martha, the blacksmith's wife, organized a quilting bee to make blankets for the baby. Little Emma Chandler still gazed at her with hero worship and brought her wildflowers she had picked on the way to school, and through it all, Zachary remained her rock. He held her when she cried, reminded her of her worth when doubt crept in, and loved her with a steadiness that made her believe in better tomorrows. In late September, as the leaves began to turn and the air took on a crisp edge, Evangeline's labor began. Mrs. Cooper and Martha were with her, along with the town's doctor, a gruff but competent man named Reynolds. It was long and difficult. The baby was positioned awkwardly, and there were hours of pain that seemed like it would never end. Zachary paced downstairs, forbidden from the birthing room by propriety, his boot falls echoing through the house. But finally, as the sun rose on a new day, Evangeline's son entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at the whole process. "He is perfect, doctor," Reynolds pronounced, placing the squalling infant in Evangeline's arms. "Healthy lungs, all his fingers and toes. Well done, Mrs. Erickson." Evangeline looked down at her son, at his red face and tiny fists, and felt a love so overwhelming it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother." Zachary was allowed in a few minutes later. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the sight of his wife holding their son, his expression one of awe. "Come meet your son," Evangeline said softly. He crossed to the bed and sat carefully on the edge, reaching out to touch the baby's downy head with one finger. "He is so small. He will grow. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Evangeline knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said, "after my father, Thomas Erickson." Zachary looked at her, understanding in his eyes. She had told him how complicated her relationship with her father had been, how his choices had shaped her life in ways both terrible and transformative. Naming their son after him was a way of making peace with the past, of acknowledging that even flawed people deserve to be remembered. "Thomas," Zachary repeated. "I like it. Thomas Zachary Erickson." Their son chose that moment to yawn, a tiny perfect gesture that made them both laugh. "Welcome to the world, Thomas," Zachary said. "We promise to do our best by you." The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. Evangeline took a leave from teaching to care for him, though she continued to handle the ranch accounts from home. Zachary was a devoted father, taking the baby with him on rides around the ranch and proudly showing him off to anyone who would listen. Red Cloud gradually settled back into its routines. The scandal faded into memory, replaced by new dramas and concerns. Evangeline found that most people treated her the same as they always had, though there remained a few who would never fully accept her. She learned to live with that. Not everyone had to like her or approve of her for her life to have meaning. Gerald Thornton never returned, though they heard through various sources that his cattle syndicate had moved on to other territories. Zachary's refusal to sell, combined with the negative publicity from the newspaper articles, had apparently convinced them that the Circle E was more trouble than it was worth. When Thomas was 18 months old, Evangeline returned to teaching. Mrs. Cooper happily agreed to watch the baby during school hours, and Evangeline found that she had missed the work more than she realized. The children welcomed her back with enthusiastic chaos, and she settled into her dual roles of teacher and mother with a sense of contentment she had never imagined possible. Life was not perfect. There were still difficult days, still moments when the weight of her past threatened to drag her down. But there were also Zachary's arms around her at night, Thomas's delighted laughter when his father came home, the satisfaction of watching her students master new skills. She had built something real here. Something that belonged to her not because she had lied or pretended, but because she had worked for it, earned it, fought to protect it. 3 years after Thomas's birth, Evangeline found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter arrived on a snowy December morning, it felt like a gift. "Lily," Evangeline said, looking at the tiny red-haired infant in her arms. "Lily Marie Erickson." "She has your chin," Zachary observed, tracing the baby's delicate features with his finger. "And your hair, apparently. Where did that red come from?" "My grandmother," Zachary admitted. "She was Irish, fierce as they come." "Then Lily is in good company." Thomas, now a rambunctious 4-year-old, was initially suspicious of the tiny creature who had invaded his home. But within days, he had appointed himself her protector, bringing her his favorite toys and singing her the songs Evangeline had taught him. The family grew and thrived. The ranch prospered, expanding its operations and becoming one of the most successful in the region. The school flourished under Evangeline's continued guidance, and she became known throughout the county as an exceptional educator. Years passed. Thomas grew into a serious boy with his father's steady nature and his mother's quick mind. Lily turned out to be as fierce as her Irish great-grandmother, with a stubborn streak a mile wide and a heart full of compassion. When Thomas was 8 and Lily was 5, Evangeline found herself pregnant once more. At 33, she worried that she might be too old, but Dr. Reynolds assured her she was perfectly healthy. This time, she gave birth to twin boys, much to everyone's surprise and Zachary's delighted consternation. "2 at once," he said, staring at the infants in wonder. "How am I going to keep track of 2 more children?" "The same way you manage the ranch," Evangeline said, laughing despite her exhaustion. "With patience and organization and a lot of prayer." They named the twins Samuel and Benjamin, and the house that had once seemed so spacious suddenly felt full to bursting with noise and life and love. As the children grew, Evangeline made sure they understood the importance of honesty and second chances. She told them, in age-appropriate ways, about her past and the choices she had made. She wanted them to understand that people were complex, that mistakes did not define you, and that redemption was always possible. "Your mother is the bravest person I know," Zachary told them one evening as they sat around the dinner table. Thomas was 12 now, already showing signs of the man he would become. She took risks, made hard choices, and built something beautiful from nothing. That is what I want all of you to remember. And your father, Evangeline added, reaching across the table to take Zachary's hand, gave me the chance to do that. He saw past what I had been to what I could become. That kind of faith in another person is a rare and precious gift. The children listened with varying degrees of attention, the twins more interested in throwing peas at each other than in the lesson. But Evangeline knew the words would sink in eventually. Children learned as much from watching how their parents lived as from what they said. Red Cloud continued to grow and change. The railroad arrived, just as Zachary had predicted, transforming the sleepy prairie town into a bustling hub of commerce. New businesses opened. More families arrived. The school had to expand to accommodate all the children. Evangeline hired 2 assistant teachers and focused on developing the curriculum and mentoring the younger educators. She found that she loved this work, shaping not just students but future teachers who would carry on the mission of education. Zachary's hair began to show gray at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still strong, still capable, still the man who had believed in her when she had not believed in herself. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Nearly the whole town turned out, bringing food and gifts and well wishes. Evangeline stood on the porch looking out at the crowd and marveled at how far she had come. From a frightened woman with a carpet bag full of secrets to this, a respected teacher, a beloved wife, a mother of 4. It seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake from at any moment, but it was real. The evidence was all around her in the faces of her children, the strength of her husband's hand in hers, the community that had ultimately chosen acceptance over judgment. "Happy," Zachary murmured in her ear. "Deliriously," she said, echoing the words she had used on their wedding night so many years ago, and she was. The years continued their steady march. Thomas went off to college in Lincoln, determined to study agriculture and business so he could help modernize the ranch. Lily announced at 16 that she wanted to be a doctor, shocking everyone but surprising no one who knew her fierce determination. The twins, now lanky teenagers, were inseparable and constantly getting into mischief that reminded Evangeline painfully of the Murphy boys she had taught all those years ago. Evangeline's hair turned silver, though her eyes remained bright and sharp. Zachary's joints grew stiff in the winter, and he relied more on his foreman to handle the daily operations of the ranch. But he still rode out most mornings, still loved the land with the same passion he had when Evangeline first met him. They sat together on the porch one autumn evening, watching the sun set over the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. The house was quiet, the children all occupied with their own activities. "You have any regrets?" Zachary asked, his voice reflective. Evangeline thought about it, really thought about it. There were things she wished had been different, choices she might have made another way if she had known then what she knew now. But regrets? No, she said finally. Everything I went through, all the hard times and the fear and the mistakes, they all led me here. To you, to our children, to this life. How could I regret any of it, even the scandal, the newspaper articles and the judgment, even that? It taught me who my real friends were. It showed me that this community had depth and compassion I had not given them credit for. And it proved that you meant what you said when you promised to stand with me no matter what. He pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, comfortable in their silence, secure in their love. "I would do it all again," Zachary said quietly. "Every single part. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Evangeline Erickson." "And you saved me," she said. not just from scandal or poverty, but from myself. You made me believe I was worth saving. You saved yourself. I just gave you the space to do it. Maybe they were both right. Maybe that was what love was, ultimately. Two people creating space for each other to become their best selves, supporting each other through the hard times, and celebrating together in the good ones. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and indigo. Stars began to appear, sharp and bright in the vast prairie sky. Inside the house, they could hear Lily practicing piano and the twins arguing good-naturedly about something. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. Thomas returned from college with a degree and ideas about crop rotation and scientific ranching that made Zachary both proud and slightly overwhelmed. He took over more of the ranch operations, allowing his father to finally slow down and enjoy the fruits of decades of hard work. Lily left for medical school, one of only 3 women in her class. She wrote letters home describing the challenges and triumphs, and Evangeline read them aloud to Zachary with tears of pride in her eyes. The twins eventually went their separate ways, Samuel becoming a teacher like his mother and Benjamin joining the army. Both found their callings, both made their parents proud. Grandchildren arrived, a whole new generation to love and spoil. Evangeline taught them to read, just as she had taught their parents. Zachary took them riding and told them stories about the old days, when the prairie had been wild and open and full of possibilities. The Circle E remained in the family, passed down from father to son, a legacy of hard work and careful stewardship. The schoolhouse where Evangeline had taught for over 30 years was renamed in her honor, a bronze plaque by the door commemorating her service to the community. She protested the honor, embarrassed by the attention, but Zachary just laughed and told her to accept it gracefully. "You have earned it," he said. "You have given this town more than you realize. Let them say thank you." Red Cloud continued to evolve with the times. Automobiles replaced horses on Main Street. Electric lights illuminated homes that had once relied on oil lamps. The world moved forward, always forward, carrying the past along with it like a river carries sediment. But some things remained constant. The land still stretched endlessly under a vast sky. Cattle still grazed the prairie grasses. Families still gathered around dinner tables to share their days and their dreams. And love still had the power to transform lives, to offer second chances, to make broken things whole. Evangeline was 73 years old when Zachary's heart gave out one cold January morning. He had gone out to check on the cattle despite her protests that it was too cold, too early. Thomas found him an hour later, sitting peacefully against a fence post as though he had just stopped to rest. The grief was crushing. After 55 years together, Evangeline had almost forgotten what it was like to be alone. The house felt too large, too quiet without Zachary's presence filling it, but she was not truly alone. Her children gathered around her, and her grandchildren, and the community that she had served for so long. They carried her through the darkest days, just as she and Zachary had once carried others. At the funeral, the church was packed to overflowing. People came from all over the county to pay their respects to Zachary Erickson, the man who had built the Circle E into a thriving enterprise, who had been a pillar of the community, who had loved his wife with a devotion that had become legendary. Evangeline stood at the graveside and watched them lower her husband into the prairie soil he had loved so much. She thought about the first time she had seen him, leaning against that post outside the general store, his eyes sharp and assessing. She thought about all the years between then and now, all the moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind, to the sky, to whatever part of Zachary might still be listening. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for giving me a life I never dreamed was possible." That night, lying alone in the bed they had shared for more than 5 decades, Evangeline allowed herself to cry. She cried for the loss, for the love, for the beautiful, complicated journey they had traveled together. But even in her grief, she knew she had been blessed. Not everyone got a love like theirs. Not everyone found a partner who would stand with them through scandal and hardship, who would choose them again and again despite everything. Zachary had been her miracle, and she had been his. And the life they had built together was a testament to the power of second chances and the redemptive nature of true love. Evangeline lived another 5 years after Zachary's death, long enough to see more grandchildren born and to watch her children thrive in their chosen paths. She spent her days reading, tending her garden, and writing letters to family members scattered across the country. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie, and she could swear she felt Zachary beside her, his presence as real as it had been when he was alive. When her own time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, a small smile on her face as though she were dreaming of something beautiful. They buried her next to Zachary, their graves marked by simple stones that bore their names and the dates that bracketed their extraordinary lives. The whole town turned out for the funeral, just as they had for Zachary's. "She was the finest teacher I ever had," said Sarah Peterson, now a grandmother herself. "She taught me that mistakes do not define you, that you can always start over if you have courage. She was my friend," Mrs. Cooper's daughter said. Even when others judged her, she remained kind and generous. She never let bitterness take root. One by one, people shared their memories, painting a picture of a woman who had transformed a small prairie town through the simple act of loving it and being loved in return. Years later, when Thomas was an old man himself, his own grandchildren would ask him about the woman whose name was on the schoolhouse. "That was your great-grandmother," he would say, his eyes distant with memory. "She came to Red Cloud with nothing but secrets and hope. And she built a legacy of love that touched everyone she met." Was she really a saloon singer? The children would ask, having heard whispered versions of the story. "She was," Thomas would confirm. "And she was also the bravest, kindest, most devoted person I have ever known. She taught me that your past does not determine your future. What matters is what you choose to do with the chances you are given. And your father, what was he like?" Thomas would smile then, remembering. He was the kind of man who looked past what everyone else saw to the truth underneath. "He loved your great-grandmother not despite who she had been, but because of who she was becoming. That is the kind of love we should all hope to find." The story of Zachary and Evangeline Erickson became part of Red Cloud's folklore, a tale told and retold with embellishments and romanticization. But at its heart, the truth remained simple and profound. A woman had come to a frontier town carrying secrets and shame. A cowboy had seen through her disguise and offered her not just employment, but understanding. Together, they had built a life based on honesty, hard work, and a love that refused to be diminished by scandal or judgment. They had raised children who carried their values into the world. They had touched countless lives through their example of grace and forgiveness. They had proved that redemption was possible, that second chances were worth giving, and that love could indeed conquer all. The Circle E Ranch still operated, now in the hands of Thomas's son, carrying on the traditions that Zachary had established and Evangeline had helped maintain. The schoolhouse that bore her name continued to educate children, instilling in them the same love of learning that she had championed. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the prairie and the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, It was easy to imagine two figures sitting on a ranch house porch, holding hands and watching the beauty of the world they had helped build together. Their story had ended, but their legacy lived on in every child who learned to read, in every second chance freely given, in every act of courage that chose love over fear. Evangeline Zimmerman had come to Red Cloud pretending to be a schoolteacher. Zachary Erickson had known the truth and hired her anyway. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift one person can offer another, the space to become who she was always meant to be. Their love story was written in the soil of Nebraska, in the faces of their descendants, in the values of a community they had helped shape. It was a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of second chances, and the enduring truth that we are all more than the sum of our mistakes. And if that was not a happily ever after, then nothing was.